What is your prerequisite for a great story? One very important element of a great story is that by the end of the story, our main character, at least, is transformed into someone new. In the film Anora, I guess we could consider somewhat of a tragedy because the title character, Anora, doesn't really get transformed the way she hoped she would be. In the film Anora, I think what we can find is actually a collision course of two fairy tales that have predominantly influenced our way of thinking as far back as childhood. And those two fairy tales would be Cinderella on one hand, and on the other hand, Beauty and the Beast. So without further ado, let's get into the video and look at this collision course of fairy tales in the Academy Award-winning film Anora. So looking deeper, I guess, for lack of a better term, of the film Anora, we can look at the three-act structure of the film in terms of the fairy tales that each act kind of follows. What I mean is that looking at the first act, we have the Cinderella story of Anora meeting Ivan and becoming this married couple in seemingly Cinderella type of fashion. And what I mean by that is that the Cinderella fairy tale is basically about female transformation. That especially someone of high status come into a person's life and, transform her life and herself out of the quote-unquote drudgery of daily life and into this wondrous fantasy world of, Prince Charming and castles and balls and evening gowns, so to speak. I mean, that would be the first act of Anora, the Cinderella act. However, it does not come without a price. And what we see in the film Anora is that the Prince Charming, Ivan, is perhaps far too young, far too inexperienced to understand the responsibilities of committing to someone in holy matrimony, so to speak. He's this very young man of 21 years old, whose whole life has been surrounded by servants. However, in high pressure situations, it's most likely not just in the film, but in our own lives as well, that such an environment would just lead our quote-unquote Prince Charming, Princess Charming to view even the significant other as simply another servant under his or her employment, which instead of transforming a person, in this case Cinderella or Anora, into a higher status of existence, she or he would not be transformed at all and remain, quote-unquote, of lower status than the Prince Charming in the Cinderella narrative. So in this look at Anora as a collision course of fairy tales, that's the Cinderella fairy tale. And what is the other fairy tale that is on a collision course with the Cinderella fantasy? And that would be Beauty and the Beast. And in terms of the film Anora, as represented through the character and relationship with Eager. So where Ivan represents the Cinderella fairy tale, we could say that Eager represents the Beauty and Beast fairy tale. And where Cinderella is a narrative about female transformation, Beauty and the Beast, we could say, is a narrative more along the lines of male transformation. Transformation that comes through the empathy and loving care of a woman and a man, at least in terms of fairy tales. And in a sense, we can see this male transformation of Eager as he's introduced as the hired muscle to safeguard the guardians of Ivan as they try to track him down. And throughout the film, it's kind of interesting that the director chose to focus the camera on Ivan whenever Anora was being, berated by Ivan's mother, the two guardians, Toros and Ganik. Really, beating her sense of self down as being nothing more than, starts with the letter P, and if you've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. And it's really a sad thing to be labeled as unworthy because of, choices that people would have to make under very difficult circumstances that, Ivan even didn't investigate to empathize with Anora. All of the older members in the film were just hammering down on Anora. That in the film, there's many times where the camera would focus on Eager, and we see his reaction as well to what was happening to Anora, and we can see in his eyes, I guess, poetically speaking, that he was developing some sympathy for the girl, as well as empathy too. And to see him transform from this hitman protecting the, Toros and Ganik. Throughout the film, we see how Ivan is transformed as being more of maybe not so much a protector for Anora, but at least someone who is there to support her in the face of all of this pressure coming onto her shoulders because of Ivan's lack of being a man, so to speak, and all the other adults' lack of being adult. So where we have the Cinderella narrative being a narrative of female transformation. On the other hand, we have Beauty and the Beast being a narrative of male transformation. And, Cinderella narrative in the first act, and then we have the Beauty and the Beast narrative in the third act, mostly. The second act is the collision of these two fairy tales coming at play. And we see how the transformations actually switch so that the Cinderella narrative becomes a story of male transformation. And in this case, the transformation of Prince Charming, Ivan, transforming himself from Prince Charming to a beast, or, in Anora's word, the P word that rhymes with, what would it rhyme with? Hey, if you know what rhymes with, that P word, put it down in the comments. But, something along the lines of a cat. And then at the same time, we have the Beauty and the Beast narrative in the second act, being more of a female transformation, in that we see Anora from this beauty becoming a beast, fighting back against Ganek and Toros and Ivan and Diamond back at headquarters where they both were employed. So I guess when, you have these two fairy tales at the ends of the story, the large part of the second act will kind of twist the transformations in terms of gender as a way to play out this drama and this comedy and, in the end, tragedy, in terms of not actually being transformed at the end of the story. So I think this idea of having two fairy tales come into collision in the second act is a great way for writers to play around with the idea, taking various other fairy tales or mythologies. One fairy tale at the beginning of the story, first act. Second fairy tale at the end of the story, the third act. And then, put them together in the second act and twisting it, role reversals or, whatever you can creatively imagine. I hope this look at Anora as a conflict of fairy tales can help you as a writer, as well as enjoy the film, which I think is an absolutely wonderfully crafted film. That being said, there is still one more question to ask about the film Anora. I mean, can we really say that Igor was falling in love with Anora, or was he simply just being very understanding of the whole situation, and at the root of his sense of identity is kindness? And was there something that was, presented in plain sight that was easily missed to give us a more succinct idea of the ending, and how, Anora gave herself to Igor, and Igor went out of his way to support Anora? It's something that I would love to talk about, and that I will put into video form in the future. So if you're interested, I welcome you to subscribe and all that kind of stuff, notifications to know when the next video comes out, as to what was the key factor in Anora and Igor coming together at the end of the film. And a working title that I'm thinking of making the next video that's coming up: who is the most important person in the film Anora, and how much is that person also the most important person in our own lives? So thank you very much for making it to the end of this video. I really do deeply appreciate it. I wish you all the best in your own writing and travels. And in the meantime, keep turning the page, and catch you in the next one.